The United States produces $28 trillion worth of goods and services every single year. That's more than China and Japan combined. The average American earns $80,000 annually, while the global average sits at just $18,000. In fact, even America's poorest state, Mississippi, has a higher GDP per capita than France or the UK. But here's what's really striking. Just 250 years ago, America was nothing. A collection of farming colonies on the edge of a continent most Europeans had never seen. There were no factories, no cities to speak of, and the entire economy was smaller than that of the Netherlands. Yet somehow, this backwater became the richest nation in human history, and it did so faster than any country before or since. Most people assume it's because of natural resources. America had oil, coal, fertile land, but so did Russia, Brazil, and Argentina, and none of them became superpowers. Others point to democracy or freedom, but plenty of democracies stayed poor for centuries. The real answer is far more interesting, and it has almost nothing to do with what most people think. This is the story of how America built an economic machine that changed the world. To understand why America got so rich, you have to start with what it inherited. And on paper, the geography looks almost unfair. The country sits between two oceans, meaning it's nearly impossible to invade. No land borders with hostile powers. No threats from neighbors. That alone is a massive advantage. While Europe spent centuries tearing itself apart in wars, America could focus entirely on building. But it gets better. The Mississippi River system is the largest navigable waterway network in the world. It connects the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, creating a natural highway for moving goods across thousands of miles. Before railroads, before trucks, this river system allowed farmers in the Midwest to ship grain to New Orleans and from there to the world. No other country had anything close to this. China's rivers run east to west. Russia's freeze for half the year. Europe's are fragmented across dozens of countries. Then there's the land itself. The Great Plains are some of the most fertile farmland on Earth. Flat, easy to cultivate, perfect for mechanized agriculture. By the mid-1800s, America was already producing more food than it could consume. And unlike most countries, it didn't have to choose between feeding its people and industrializing. It could do both. But here's the thing. Geography explains why America could get rich. It doesn't explain why it actually did. Because plenty of countries have had great geography and stayed poor. Argentina has fertile land and navigable rivers. It was richer than the US for parts of the 19th century. Today, its economy is in shambles. Russia has vast resources and land, yet its GDP is smaller than Italy's. So geography gave America the opportunity. But something else made it happen. What made America different wasn't just what it had. It was what it built. And the most important thing it built wasn't a railroad or a factory. It was a system, a set of rules that made getting rich not just possible, but almost inevitable. The first rule was property rights. In most of the world, if you built something, there was no guarantee you'd get to keep it. Kings could seize your land. Nobles could take your crops. The government could shut down your business on a whim. But in America, the Constitution protected private property from the start. If you owned something, it was yours. And that created an incentive to build, to invest, to take risks. Because you knew that if it paid off, you'd reap the rewards. The second rule was contract enforcement. If you made a deal, the courts would make sure it was honored. That might sound boring, but it's actually revolutionary because it means you can do business with strangers. You don't need to know someone personally or rely on family networks. You just need a contract, and that opens up the entire economy. Suddenly, a farmer in Iowa can sell to a buyer in New York without ever meeting them. A factory owner in Pittsburgh can order steel from Cleveland and know it'll arrive as promised. The third rule was bankruptcy protection. In most countries, if your business failed, you were ruined. You could be thrown in prison, lose everything, be shamed for life. But America allowed people to fail, restructure, and try again. And that meant people were willing to take big risks. Because even if you lost everything, you could start over. This is why America has always had more entrepreneurs per capita than almost anywhere else. Failure wasn't the end. It was just expensive education. But the most important rule was something most people overlook. The government stayed out of the way. It didn't pick winners and losers. It didn't decide which industries to favor or which businesses to protect. It set the rules enforced them fairly, and then let people compete. And that created something powerful. A system where the best ideas won, not the ones with the best government connections. But even with great geography and good rules, America still needed one more thing: people, lots of them. And not just any people. It needed workers, inventors, risk takers, people willing to leave everything behind and build something new. Between 1850 and 1920, over 30 million people immigrated to the United States. They came from Ireland, Italy, Germany, Poland, China, Japan, everywhere. And they didn't come because life was easy. They came because it was possible. In Europe, if you were born poor, you stayed poor. Social mobility was almost non-existent. But in America, the story was different. You could arrive with nothing, and if you worked hard and got lucky, build something. And here's what made it work. America didn't just take in people, it gave them a reason to produce. Immigrants couldn't rely on government support or family wealth. They had to work. And because property rights and contract law applied to everyone, they could actually keep what they earned. A German farmer could buy land in Wisconsin. An Italian laborer could open a shop in New York. A Chinese immigrant could start a business in San Francisco, and the system protected them all the same. This created a selection effect. The people who came to America were, on average, more ambitious, more willing to take risks, more desperate to succeed. They had to be, because the ones who weren't didn't make the journey. And that meant America was constantly importing human capital. Not just bodies, but drive. But immigration alone doesn't explain it. Russia took in millions of people too. So did Brazil and Argentina. The difference was what happened after they arrived. In America, the system rewarded productivity. You could start at the bottom and climb, and that meant immigrants didn't just fill jobs, they created them. By the late 1800s, America had everything in place: great geography, strong institutions, a massive, hungry workforce. But what turned it into a superpower was what happened next. America built a machine for turning ideas into money. It started with patents. The US patent system, established in 1790, made it easy and cheap to protect inventions. If you created something new, you could own it. And that meant if it made money, you made money. This was radically different from Europe, where patent systems were expensive, slow, and often required royal approval. In America, a farmer with a clever idea could file a patent for a few dollars, and if it worked, become wealthy, and the numbers prove it. By 1900, the US was issuing more patents per year than Britain, France, and Germany combined. Inventors like Thomas Edison filed over 1,000 patents in his lifetime. The Wright brothers, Alexander Graham Bell, Nikola Tesla, they all thrived in a system that rewarded innovation. But patents were just the start. America also built the world's first venture capital system. Banks and investors were willing to fund risky ideas because the legal system protected their investments. If a business failed, they lost money, but the contracts were honored. If it succeeded, they made fortunes. And that created a cycle. Success bred more investment, which bred more innovation, which bred more success. Then came standardization. America created national standards for everything: railroad gauges, electrical voltages, screw threads, units of measurement. That might sound boring, but it was transformative because it meant a part made in one factory would work in another. A product designed in New York could be manufactured in Chicago and sold in Los Angeles without modification. Europe, by contrast, was fragmented. Different countries, different standards, different regulations. American companies could scale in ways European companies couldn't, and scale is what made the difference. By the early 1900s, American companies weren't just big, they were massive. Standard Oil controlled 90% of US oil refining. US Steel produced more steel than Britain and Germany combined. Ford Motor Company was building cars on assembly lines, making them affordable for ordinary people. No other country had firms this size, and size brought efficiency, lower costs, and global dominance. But even with all of this, America wasn't yet the world's dominant economy. In 1914, Britain still ruled the largest empire in history. Germany was the industrial powerhouse of Europe. France was a major global player. Then came World War I, and everything changed. While Europe tore itself apart, America stayed out of the fighting for 3 years. And during that time, it did something brilliant. It sold to everyone. American factories produced steel, weapons, food, everything the warring nations needed, and Europe paid in gold. By the time America entered the war in 1917, it had gone from the world's largest debtor nation to the world's largest creditor. European countries owed America billions, but the real transformation came after the war. Europe was devastated, factories destroyed, economies shattered, entire generations of young men dead. America, by contrast, was untouched. Its factories were intact, its workforce was growing, and it now held most of the world's gold reserves. The global financial center shifted from London to New York almost overnight. Then came World War II, and once again, the pattern repeated. Europe and Asia destroyed each other while America built. By 1945, the US economy was larger than the next 5 countries combined. It produced half of the world's manufactured goods, half of the world's oil. It had the only major currency still backed by gold. And here's the key. After both wars, America didn't just take advantage of the chaos. It rebuilt the system in its image. The Marshall Plan poured billions into Europe, but with conditions. Countries had to open their markets, adopt free trade, and integrate into a US-led economic order. The Bretton Woods system made the dollar the world's reserve currency. The World Bank and IMF were headquartered in Washington. America had built a global economy where its rules were everyone's rules. But even after the wars ended, America kept pulling ahead. And the reason comes down to structural advantages that most countries simply can't replicate. First, the dollar. Because the dollar is the world's reserve currency, America can borrow at rates no other country can match. When the US government needs money, it issues bonds, and the world buys them. Not because they love America, but because dollars are the safest, most liquid asset on earth. That means America can run deficits that would bankrupt other nations. It can spend more than it earns, year after year, because the world keeps lending to it. Second, the consumer market. America has 330 million people with high incomes. If you're a company anywhere in the world and you want to scale, you need access to American consumers. That gives the US enormous leverage. It can set standards, impose regulations, and control access to the wealthiest market on earth. Want to sell cars in America? You follow American safety standards. Want to list your company on US stock exchanges? You follow American accounting rules. Third, the tech ecosystem. Silicon Valley isn't just a place, it's a system. Venture capital, top universities, skilled immigrants, a culture that celebrates risk. No other country has managed to replicate it. China has tried with Shenzhen. Europe has tried with Berlin and London. But none of them have the same combination of capital, talent, and tolerance for failure. And that means the most valuable companies in the world, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, are all American. Fourth, the military. America spends more on defense than the next 9 countries combined. And that's not just about security, it's about control. American aircraft carriers patrol the world's oceans, keeping trade routes open. American military bases in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East project power and protect allies. And in return, those allies buy American weapons, adopt American technology, and integrate into American-led alliances. The military isn't just defense, it's the enforcement mechanism for the entire system. But here's what people don't talk about. America's wealth didn't come from nowhere, and it didn't come without cost. The land wasn't empty when settlers arrived. Native American populations were displaced, killed, or forced onto reservations. Entire civilizations were erased to make room for farms, railroads, and cities. That's not a footnote, it's foundational. The same land that made America rich was taken by force. Then there's slavery. For over 200 years, the American economy ran on stolen labor. Cotton, the most valuable export in the 1800s, was picked by enslaved people. The wealth that built railroads, factories, and banks came, in part, from a system of brutal exploitation. And even after slavery ended, segregation and discrimination kept Black Americans locked out of economic opportunity for another century. And it's not just history. American wealth today depends on a global system that benefits America disproportionately. The dollar's dominance means other countries have to hold dollars to trade. That gives America power to sanction, control, and punish. When the US imposes financial sanctions, it can cut countries off from the global economy. No other nation has that kind of leverage. Trade deals are written in America's favor. Intellectual property laws protect American companies. The global financial system is designed to benefit American banks. And while that's made America rich, it's also created resentment because the same rules that help America often hurt everyone else. So why is America so rich? It's not one thing. It's a combination of factors that came together in a way that's never been repeated. Geography gave it security and resources. Institutions gave it the rules to turn those resources into wealth. Immigration gave it the people to build. Innovation gave it the ideas to scale. 2 world wars gave it the opportunity to dominate. And structural advantages keep it on top. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Replicating America's success is almost impossible because most of the advantages it has, other countries simply can't copy. You can't move your country between 2 oceans. You can't go back and fight 2 world wars where your homeland stays untouched. You can't create a reserve currency by force of will. What you can do is build strong institutions, protect property rights, enforce contracts fairly, let people fail and try again, encourage immigration and innovation, and stay out of the way when people are building. Because America didn't get rich by accident. It got rich because it built a system that made wealth creation not just possible, but inevitable. And that system, more than anything else, is what set it apart.